right, welcome back, everyone. I am hoping you all had a chance to have some of that lunch. That was wonderful. Thank you to our UB team for setting up that lunch for us. Okay, we're moving into our guest speaker portion of the Feast of Absalom Jones. And many of our feast days, we like to have our premier guest speaker. And this year, we are blessed to have the Right Reverend Eugene Taylor Sutton with us. Bishop Sutton is a senior pastor at Chautauqua Institution. He's also the assistant bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. That sounds like 3 or 4 jobs, so I don't know how you do it all. He's the retired bishop of the Diocese of Maryland. He previously served as canon pastor of Washington National Cathedral and director of the Cathedral Center for Prayer and Pilgrimage before being ordained bishop in 2008. He has served as college chaplain, parish priest, and professor of homiletics and liturgy at Vanderbilt University Divinity School. Bishop Sutton's ministry has been noted for his focus on contemplative spirituality, racial reconciliation, nonviolence, and environmental stewardship. He co-founded the Contemplative Outreach of Maryland and Washington, an ecumenical network of those committed to the contemplative dimensions of the gospel in daily life, and is a contributor to the books, The Diversity of Centering Prayer and Reclaiming the Gospel of Peace, Challenging the Epidemic of Gun Violence. Thank you so much, Bishop Sutton, for being with us. Before I invite you up, I am going to invite Bishop Nathan Baxter, our namesake of our Union of Black Episcopalians, to say a few words.
Okay. Father, let me tell you about Eugene Sutton. Oh, no. That's good. I'm just so delighted my friend is here. You all know a lot about him because he's been such a significant leader in the life of the church. But there's one story I want to tell, and that is, how many here saw the 9/11 service from the National Cathedral? He was key because he led the cathedral's delegation in negotiating with the White House. And one of the things that I insisted upon is that we have a Jewish leadership as well as Muslim leadership present. And of course, there were many other representatives of denominations and so on. And so the service was coming along, and when we brought the matter of Eugene, they have brought up about the imam. They were upset about that. And so he and the team kind of pushed him. So Friday they said, well, we can have an imam who can maybe near the end of the service say something. But we said, no, tell them we want the imam there with the rabbi, the bishop, all of them. We need to send a message. So they were working on it, and finally, they were very recalcitrant. He came back, he said, we're working on it, but we'll go back and tell them, if we cannot have an imam and have that person offer prayers with the Jewish and the others, the cardinals and so on, we're not gonna have it. So Gene went, and he came back, and he said, now Nathan, don't get upset. And I said, he knew me. He said, don't get upset. He said, but I just need to tell you, the White House has told us. Was it Mrs. Bush that was the White House rep?
I can't say.
Okay. but the committee said, he said, now don't get upset. He said, but the White House told us they have found a Christian imam. I said, what? He said, no, that's not. Listen, we got this, but I just thought you needed to know that. So Eugene went out with his group and they reached out to major Islamic societies around the country and asked them for recommendations. And it was through that that we had that little aspect that we had the imam chosen that represented the American Muslim community, and that person stood with all the other religious representatives to read the Quran and its prayers. So he's quite a negotiator, and I'm so proud of Eugene and so grateful for your friendship.
My gosh. Well. Okay, here we are. Man, introductions. I get embarrassed with these introductions. They never say enough. All right, good afternoon, church. Good afternoon. This is Susquehanna. Are you happy to be here now? Are you happy to be here? Yes. It's always great. Are you grateful to be in the house of the Lord? Somebody say that again. Tell me God has brought you a mighty long way. Say, thank you, Lord. You know that God has been good to you. God is good. All the time? Okay, we're warmed up now. Get started here on this occasion. I want to first give a big thank you to my colleagues and friends in ministry. Bishop Audrey Scanlon, I know that she can't be here today because I'm speaking. No, she's done such good work in this diocese, following on the heels of Bishop Baxter and furthering the work of reconciliation, and my good friend and colleague, Kevin Nichols, too. Kevin is always, I'm always impressed with his humility, his way of putting things, and his exaggeration at what I do. Thank you, Salal. Thank you, Father, for opening up this great church. You know, this looks like a Lutheran church to me. It's so beautiful and clean and all of that, but I think Salal said, given the history of this church, I did look at the website of the history of St. Paul's, and I just got confused. I couldn't figure out now which church, you know, St. Monica's, it's this, and first, and that. And Salal reminded me that you basically got rid of a few other buildings, either by fire or you just tore it up. And here we are. Thank you for opening this church. Karen, Love, and the UBE, Union of Black Episcopalians. Thank you all for inviting me, and for Nathan Baxter. Nathan and Mary Ellen. He says, my friend, I'm not qualified to be his friend. He is a stalwart in my life. He is a mentor. And I don't know if you remember Bishop Baxter, when I was not even an Episcopal priest at the time. I think this was around 1989, 1990 or so. And he was fairly new at the National Cathedral. And I was just so impressed that a black man was dean of the National Cathedral. And I didn't know anybody, he didn't know me, but I just kind of wrote and said, here I am, I just want to meet you. And he set an appointment to meet me in his office. And I said, I was thinking about joining the Episcopal Church. And sadly, he encouraged me. He took the time for this nobody on the street, this young, I used to be young, this young black minister in another denomination was just looking to find his way. And later on, he invited me to come to the cathedral under his leadership. It's fantastic. It didn't take much to move me, as you know. He said, I want to take you out to lunch. It was the McDonald's. Wisconsin and Van. I said, okay, so that's how the cathedral was. I said, well, what's the pay? And Nathan said, well, to be a canon in a cathedral is more cachet than cash. But last of all, I want to give thanks to God. I want to give thanks to God for the opportunity to stand before you today, because today I want to talk with you about why celebrating Black History Month is important.
Amen.
We're going to get to reparations a bit, and in the second hour is when we're going to spend more time on reparations itself. But right now, I just want to talk about the significance of this month and how it matters not just for our culture, not just for our country, but to our faith. Because Black history is not just about giving information, it's about testimony. If you believe that, I want you to shout out testimony. I'm going to testify here. Testify that the God of the Bible repeatedly calls his people to remember. Remember. In Deuteronomy, God tells the Israelites to remember where he brought them from. Remember that I brought you out of slavery to freedom. Remember the stone from which you were hewn. Remember. In the book of Joshua, they built stones or set up as memorials for future generations to ask, what do these stones mean? Remember. Remember, in the New Testament, Jesus, on the last night of his earthly ministry, he's at supper with his disciples. He breaks bread before them. And he says, do this, what? In remembrance of me. Remembering is holy work. Holy work. Black History Month is an act of remembrance. It's a way of honoring what God has carried his people through, and acknowledging the faith that sustained them when freedom was denied and dignity was challenged. The Black History Month itself, even though it's a secular holiday, it cannot be separated from faith. During slavery, Black Americans were often denied education, denied freedom, denied humanity, but they were never able to be denied by God. Enslaved people held on to the scriptures, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. They read about Moses leading the Israelites out of bondage and saw their own story. They read about the Psalms and found words for their suffering. They trusted a God who heard the cries of the oppressed. The church was not just a building, it was a refuge. Spirituals were not just songs, they were prayers. Oh, oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me, over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Faith is not theoretical. It's survival. Spiritualism, survival. Black History Month reminds us of a people who believed that God was still present even when justice was delayed. God was there. So why are we here today? Black History Month is not just important, but it's necessary, not as a symbolic gesture, not as a box to check once a year, but as a meaningful act of remembrance, recognition, education, responsibility. It's often misunderstood. Some people think of it as divisive. Somehow Black History Month reminds us of why we're divided. Others see it as repetitive. And some wonder why Black history should be highlighted at all, rather than just folded quietly into American history. But that question, why do we need Black History Month, is exactly why we still do. First of all, we need to be honest about something. History itself is not neutral. History is written by people. And for a very long time, the people writing the history books, setting curricula, and deciding whose stories mattered did not include Black Americans, or included them only in limited, often painful ways. What ways? for generations, if you heard of black people in history, they always appeared as enslaved laborers. That was all you needed to know. Or victims of segregation, or background figures in somebody else's story. Even in the statuary in Washington all over, you will see the main Americans standing tall, and enslaved black persons would be at their feet. In the movies, they were servants, they were maids, never scientists, never teachers, never inventors, never artists. Nothing about their innovation or leadership or creativity or resistance and brilliance, no. And that was not an accident. The absence of black people in the stories of America was intentional. I remember, it wasn't that many years ago, certainly in the last 15 years, when the kids were smaller, my wife and I, we took a trip to Charleston, South Carolina. I love Charleston. Beautiful city. We said, let's take one of those plantation tours. These beautiful plantations. And we did. Nice stuff. You know, I rubbed my fingers along the windowsills, no dust. It's clean. But as the tour went on, and it was all about the beauty of the flowers and all that, I think, well, what about the story of the plantation? Well, I asked the leader about that. She said, well, people don't want to hear about that. They're just here to have, just to see the beauty of the place. And in the distance, I saw some shacks. And there was an old wooden fence that separated from the main tour. Those shacks. I hopped the fence. Now, you would know about this because Sonia got scared. She said, oh my God, the pastor of the cathedral is going to get arrested. I went up at a fence toward those shacks, and there in the weeds, I cleared away, I saw something, I cleared away some weeds, and there flat was a fallen tombstone of an enslaved person. It was holy ground. Weeded over, shacks off the tour. But the tour did not mention how those grounds got to be where they were. Who cultivated the soil? Who tilled it? Who did the work? And by the way, who benefits even today from it? That tour cost a lot of money. Who's getting that money? It wasn't by the state, it was by the family who lived, the descendants of the family who lived in the house. But the descendants of those who worked the place are not to be mentioned or found. Why do we need Black History Month? Because you got to tell the story.
Yes.
The whole story.
Yes.
It's not minimizing the past. It's not telling part of the story. It's telling the whole story. Black History Month exists because without deliberate effort, Black contributions are too easily ignored. It exists to correct the record, not to rewrite history, but to complete it. But here's the irony. Black history is American history. The truth, we can't avoid it. There is no American history without Black history. Black Americans built this country to a large extent, literally and culturally. Enslaved Africans built the infrastructure, cultivated land, and generated wealth that fueled the early American growth. After emancipation, Black Americans shaped music, literature, art, science, medicine, sports, politics, and social movements that still define America today. From the spirituals to gospel music, from the blues to jazz to hip hop. I don't know how many of y'all were here this morning and saw the youth. And if I'd known they were giving awards, You know, what was her name who danced?
Natalia.
Yeah. Oh my God, you know, I could have danced. You know, war. From agricultural innovations to medical breakthroughs, from the civil rights movement to modern voting rights advocacy, Black history is not a side chapter in the book of America. It's woven into the foundation of the nation. Unfortunately, we have forgotten that, or it hasn't been taught at all. No wonder so many Americans never knew that. And just a little word here about a false narrative about America, buttressed by the literature, media, films, and art, that America was once an almost all-white nation. With, you know, with a few other people of color. You know, American history, though, became, in that false narrative, American history became the history of what the 17th through 20th century Europeans and their descendants did here with a few people of color on the sidelines. The truth is that this nation was always a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural society with sizable and sometimes major contributions, and sometimes in numbers, majorities of non-white peoples. Some states in the South, South Carolina, was a mostly black state. And whole swaths, when the Europeans came, it wasn't a barren land. People lived here. Indigenous people lived here. Asians were here. Enslaved Africans were here. Jewish populations from around the world were here. There were always sprinklings of Arabs. Mexicans were here, and in fact, in large parts of the West. In fact, for most of American history, Europeans, if they counted everybody, were in the minority. But the false narrative is the opposite. Why? History is not neutral. It's intentional. That story is not told. Intentional. And so, I wish I knew what it felt like to have white skin. And I wish every one of my white sisters and brothers could live with my beautiful black skin for even a week. I think it was David Spangler who once said the art of listening is taking on the skin of someone else and living in it for a while. And I wish to God we could all just do that. I would like to take on some of my neighbors, your beautiful white skin. And I'd like for you to take on my beautiful black skin. And let's see what the experience is like. And maybe I can understand why some of my white friends get all wigged out. I shouldn't. They get all, upset when it's like, well, in 50 years, this will be a predominantly non-white nation. I was thinking, 50 years? It was always that. You don't know the history. Or it's been denied the populations of persons who were here. Folks, the historical truth is that Europeans with white skin were rarely the overwhelming majority in these 50 states, from Alaska, Hawaii, to even to Pennsylvania. Black History Month is a reminder that God's people have always been a rainbow people, from the very start. And the American people have always been a diverse people. From the very beginnings of our nation, whether you knew it or not, whether you like it or not. What we're seeing increasingly in this country today is that those who want to resist that truth are very uncomfortable with Black History Month. And they are very invested in limiting any discussion or education of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society. They're scared to death of it. When did DEI become a bad phrase? That somehow it's about denying the rights of white people. I just got to take on white skin and figure this out and see how we get there. Unless it's born out of fear and miseducation about the world as it is and always has been. Celebrating Black History Month reminds us of the reality of the real diversity of our nation, and it's even more important when that reality is often left out of our narratives. But also, Black History Month is also about representation. And representation matters more than we sometimes realize. I'm an Episcopalian today, in no small part because a Black man was Dean of Washington National. What kind of church would have at its major pulpit, a major white mainline denomination, at its major pulpit, this man? Well, we know that they do, if you could get by the skin. You remember how many times you preach a sermon and stand up, and then somebody said, Dean Baxter, it was a wonderful sermon to me. Where I preach, and they think it was Nathan. Now, I want to tell you, that embarrasses me. But represented, when people see themselves represented and reflected in stories of achievement, leadership, and resilience, it changes what they believe is possible for their lives. Yes. For Black children and young adults, learning about inventors like Garrett Morgan, scientists like Marie Maynard Daly, writers like Paul Laurence Dunbar, or leaders like Shirley Chisholm, it sends a powerful message. Yes. And by the way, if you didn't know all those names, we need Black History Month. That message is this: you belong here. You have always belonged here. The Diocese of Maryland, we started a program for inner city youth in Baltimore. We get them off the streets in the summer. It kind of grew. They named it Sutton Scholars Program. I didn't name it. They knew I'd raise money for it. But it is taking those, it's choosing a cohort every year of about 30 or so rising ninth graders, working with the Baltimore City public school system, blessed by the mayor and the governor of Maryland. They led a religious organization, the Episcopal Church, the only religious organization they led into the public schools, because they knew we weren't going to proselytize, but that we were just going to honor the dignity of everyone. Yes. Take them on. Yes. Well, I didn't realize at the time what it meant, and I know what it made me realize. I want to know why the diocese wanted to put my name on it. The Episcopal Church has a reputation in Maryland as being with the country clubs. And these are the well-heeled people. Even in the Black churches, it's like, well, that's where the doctors and the lawyers and the teachers are. And that's what the Baltimore City school kids had in mind. And then they say, well, who's the leader of this thing? And I'd walk in and I'd see their eyes. The diocese knew that I represented something. I represented what was possible in this thing. And we'd get speakers and people in, and I wanted them to see successful Black businesswomen and men, and educators and doctors, and speak to these kids so they know what's possible. Well, that's why we have Black History Month. So Black History Month, though, isn't just for Black Americans, it benefits everyone. It expands all of our perspectives, and it challenges stereotypes and encourages empathy. And it reminds us that excellence comes from every community. Even an enslaved, degraded community for 400 years can still produce leaders. That's the story. Some critics argue that Black history focuses too much on suffering, slavery, segregation. But Black History Month is not about glorifying pain. It's about overcoming pain and suffering. It's about healing. Black History Month can help with the healing of Americans. You know, when you have a pain, say you have a pain in your side, you go to the doctor, they run a bunch of tests. The doctor says, I'm sorry, it's cancer. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? I said, well, we think we can do a lot. We may be able to get it all out. We have to do surgery. What person says, no surgery. You're not going to cut me. That hurts. No. We're going to go do what you have to do so that I can live. You know, when you have a major illness, maybe even an illness like racism, sometimes you got to do surgery. But that's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. But if you say, no, don't do that because it hurts. Don't mention slavery and that to our kids because it might make them feel bad. Feel bad about America. No, you're just telling me that it's painful. Of course it's painful. But do you want to heal or not? If you don't want the healing, don't go through the pain. You can avoid the pain, but you're going to die of the sickness. And America will die of the sickness of racism unless it is surgically removed. And that's going to be pain. Yes, it acknowledges slavery, segregation, systemic racism, but it doesn't stop there. It also highlights how Black Americans resisted oppression, organized communities, created beauty, and demanded justice, even when the odds were stacked against them. It tells the story of a people who were denied rights and dignity and still reshaped the moral conscience of a nation. It matters because understanding struggle helps us understand progress. And understanding progress helps us to protect it. So, my friends, maybe the last reason why Black History Month is important is that it creates space for us to have honest dialogue about things that are uncomfortable or inconvenient to talk about. Folks, the inequalities we see today in education, housing, healthcare, wealth, and criminal justice did not appear overnight. They are connected to historical policies and decisions that shaped generations of opportunity or the lack of it. On the website of this church, St. Paul's, I looked at the story of this church, and there was a whole page given to the red line of Harrisburg, and how this church was redlined in the red line community, but I think you moved a couple of times. I don't know. The history is confusing. We need St. Paul's Episcopal Church History Month. But it was by design. And here's the design. If you happen to be born with dark skin, then you were basically in these red line areas, which meant that you couldn't get loans to even fix up property. You didn't get a good education. You had to go outside the zone. Why were there zones? Because of a caste system that flowed from slavery, and it has repercussions to this day. When you have wide swaths of impoverished Black communities, this is not an accident. It's not their fault. This was by design. And what caused that design? Theft. Theft. For 250 years, many white Americans benefited financially off of the backs of black people. The wealth that was handed down from the generations, yes, you can inherit wealth. Thank you, Donald Trump. You inherit wealth. You can inherit wealth. You can also inherit poverty. Systems of poverty. When that happens because of theft, what do we learn in Sunday school? If you steal something from someone, A, you repent. By the way, did you know that this nation still officially has not repented of slavery? When it comes up for a vote, the dominant party puts it down because it's a reminder. I'm not going to rehearse all that. But in Sunday school, that's not what we learn. And the other thing is, well, you make amends. You have to pay it back. Now, we know we can't be paid back. Now, black Americans as a group cannot be paid back for centuries of oppression. I have done well in America. I've been very fortunate to have the parents I had, the community I had, and the opportunities, and I've taken advantage of them, and all of my friends. But even among my black friends, here's the funny thing. In Washington, we were in Northwest D.C., which is a bit more prosperous, even though it was an all-black community, than those in far Northeast D.C. We had a youth group, a young white group, all of us from the Northwest part, not wealthy, but all of us went to college and have done well. In the far Northeast group, none of them did. Some of them got lost in the criminal justice system. A few others of them died from health-related diseases that were caused by poverty. We weren't better than they were. We were given more opportunity, and we had some wealth. So it seems to me that if you want to talk about how to repair the program, you need a program of repairing, of reparation for those who did not have the opportunity, hence reparations. That for after centuries of taking money out of the impoverished black community, you put money into the impoverished black community. That's what reparations in the church has done, and that's what the Diocese of Maryland agreed to do 5 years. It's making grants into the impoverished black community. We can talk more about that later. Folks, these conversations aren't always comfortable. But discomfort is where the growth begins. These are not questions about what to do. They aren't questions that are meant to assign blame. None of us in this room are guilty of what generations of the past did. None of us. You didn't cause it. I didn't cause it. You didn't cause it. None of us are guilty. All of us are called to responsibility. Reparations is an act of responsibility. Lincoln knew it, and he was already entertaining schemes. You heard of 40 acres and a mule? What difference in this country would it have made? What difference it would have made if just even 40 acres were given to those who tilled the land so that they can build on it and raise their families in dignity. What difference that would have made to do the right thing. But then, in a great tragedy of history, he was assassinated by a Southerner who saw it coming, John Wilkes Booth, and his running mate, one of the worst presidents of all time. He immediately stopped all discussions of giving black persons anything. But there were reparations. he did institute some monetary repayment of those white slave owners who lost their land in the war. They got reparations. The Japanese got reparations in America. And in other countries, there is all sorts of schemes for reparations, except for black people. No, we can't talk about reparations for them. What difference it would have made? Well, so none of us are guilty, but all of us are responsible. I know one thing. If I was sitting on millions, let's say millions of dollars, that could be traced from the enslavement of persons, I would have some trouble sleeping. Here's what I'd say to that person. Become an Episcopalian. And work with your church to provide some of the monies you've inherited from those, and let the church help you distribute it to impoverished black communities. Dioceses, like the Diocese of Susquehanna, what they were embarking to do. Thank you, Bishop Kelly and Bishop Archer. Thank you, Bishop Baxter, for beginning the discussions in this nation, in this diocese, of anti-racism and calling for it. But each episcopacy builds on the next. And I'm looking at titans in this room, lay and clergy, who have brought Susquehanna to this point. Well, people, the biggest lesson of history is that men don't learn the lessons of history. A society that avoids its history is more likely to repeat its mistakes. A society that confronts it has a chance to do better. So, many of the freedoms that all Americans value today, voting rights, fair employment practices, desegregated schools, they exist because black Americans fought for them, often at great personal risk. This month honors those activists who marched, organized, wrote, challenged laws, sacrificed their safety so that future generations could live with greater freedom. And it honors all those of every color, race, and ethnicity, not just black Americans. Black History Month honors all in the struggle for black freedom. It took all of us to end slavery, all of us to end segregation, and it will take all of us to ensure equality and justice for all Americans. This is the month we honor all our freedom fighters, our allies in the struggle, because that work expanded democracy for everyone. So lastly, I know I said lastly 5 minutes ago, but I'm a Baptist. I was raised a Baptist. Now, Bethel Baptist Church, Washington, D.C. I sang, shouted, clapped, stomped my way into the faith. Now I'm an Episcopalian. So, you know what it means when a black preacher says finally? It doesn't mean nothing. Some people ask, why do we still need a whole, okay, Bishop, you got it. We need Black History Month, but a whole month? The answer is simple, because the dream is not yet realized. The dream of our forebears for a better inclusive America has not yet been achieved. So I'm willing to make an offer today, here at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, on this day. Here's my offer. When the statistics of black Americans in terms of economic and social equality are equal to white Americans as a whole, and when racism, prejudice, and bigotry are fully eradicated, then my offer is I will then call a meeting of all black Americans together. I can do that. And we're going to talk about what we're going to do about this. And I promise you, at that meeting, I'm going to argue, okay, it's all been eradicated, I'm going to argue for a week. So we can whittle this down to a week if we do some work. But how many of you are willing to bet that those conditions will be met in my lifetime? When Black history is taught consistently, accurately, and fully year-round, when Black contributions are no longer treated as exceptions or electives, then perhaps we can whittle it down. But until then, Black History Month is a corrective. This is, my friends, why we also have a UBE, Union of Black Episcopalians. Yes, we're unionized. Somebody asked me that a long time ago, why do I need a union? I said, well, white Episcopalians had a union for many years. It was called diocese. UBE reminds us of the history of the Black presence in the Episcopal Church. We are the descendants of men and women of courage. We come from great stuff. Absalom Jones. I can name so many, but just beginning with him. You know what his biggest contribution was? He stayed. He persevered. He didn't give up. In the struggle for freedom among Black Americans, there were two general paths. One path is create our own institutions, our own denominations, our own churches, and that's needed. The other path is, no, we're going to stay. We're not leaving. Absalom Jones had a very difficult path to ordination because he was Black. He didn't run. He stayed. For all these centuries, Black Episcopalians have stayed in this church that was at the forefront of enslaving their forebears. But we're not going anywhere. We're here. And give us a month to celebrate the presence here, because if we were in our right minds, maybe we would have left a long time ago. But God called us here. God called all of us here. And today, and this month, we celebrate that. Black History Month is important because we cannot forget. We do not forget our ancestors who trusted God when hope seemed distant. We do not forget that doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly before God is a part of discipleship. Black history matters because memory matters. It matters because truth matters. It matters because a nation that knows its full history is better equipped to shape a more just future. And it matters because we are not looking back. We are learning how to move forward. My sisters and brothers, we recommit to that work today, this day of remembrance and hope here in the Diocese of Susquehanna. May we remember today, shout today. Today. May we honor today. Today. May we walk together in love today. Today. May we go forward in truth today. Today. For this is the day that the Lord has made. Yeah. We will rejoice and be glad. Thank you all. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Sutton. Again, I say, why do we need to come back for church on Sunday? We've been to church already. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have a 15-minute break now, and then we will come back here for a Q&A with Bishop Sutton. Yeah.